Hello and welcome to a beautiful Monday on Crypto. Oh my God, the markets are in a little bit of a downtrend. No one really loves to see this. And this, of course, comes in tandem with Michael Saylor readjusting how exactly he's going to be issuing shares around Strategy, the company. And of course, this might impact the endless bid side buying that we have been seeing on Bitcoin. Does this mean top? I mean, I surely hope not. This has been a really tough market, really wonky market. But of course, we are transitioning from the retail markets to the institutions. So I don't know. Maybe this is how the cycles change, or the one kind of in the middle, figuring things out. Hard to say. Regardless, today I want to hop into something that I find to be irksome that has some history to it, and that would be the Bank Secrecy Act, which brings us KYC, AML, all the reasons that you get tons of spam mail, that your data is exploited, and just something that's been growing since 1970s. Let's get into it. Boom. Now, the Bank Secrecy Act, the BSA, let's just talk about it a little bit. And my lead into why, Graham, why this thing? Well, the US Treasury is considering adding digital ID checks to DeFi smart contracts to fight illicit finance. Like, what is a digital ID check? DeFi smart contracts, they're already programmed. I mean, do they have to validate this? This is the whole point about DeFi, is that they don't. Is this the point to put these kind of checks? I mean, there's a lot of questions happening here, but the long and the short of it is this continued attack on crypto where they want the contracts themselves to enforce this intermediary-based system of control that exists in the current financial world. Recall, these smart contracts, they do exactly what they say they're supposed to do. Their code is verifiable, and to put the enforcement on them, it's just quite frankly ridiculous. It's not necessary. It adds undue pressure, and quite frankly, all of the ones in existence today just don't fit the bill on this. So it would be very problematic if this went into effect. Now let's talk about the history of KYC AML and of course the BSA. What we need to understand, this thing first comes into existence in 1970. It's passed by Richard Nixon, really requiring banks to start keeping records of money transfers over $10,000. Now, this is something that they found a lot of banks already had begun to do, but what's really interesting is that this actually comes back to bite Nixon a little bit later. Now, when we do introduce it, it's just a baby act. It does grow over time, just as this graphic really proves. And we do get a Supreme Court challenge almost right out of the gate in 73, 74 with the California Bankers Association versus Schultz. The complaints being a challenge on the First, Fourth, and Fifth Amendments on constitutional grounds. Now, at that point, the Supreme Court looks at this and they go, we don't really think that banking has the right to privacy, and they shoot it down. Of course, it happens again later with the Fifth Circuit appeals, and it just maintains itself. But this continues, and it's really just record keeping about banking transactions, and maybe that's not so crazy. However, it gets a couple major shots in the arm early in the 90s, of course, and then of the 2001 Patriot Act. For anyone that doesn't remember the Patriot Act, it comes out of the September 11th attacks, and what it does is it gives the government all the surveillance tools that it could possibly want. Ever since 9/11, we have been living in a US surveillance state. So remember that when you see complaints about the Chinese surveillance state, again, we have it. It is under the Patriot Act. You can own shares in some of the companies that benefit, like Palantir, but of course, beyond the Patriot Act, it comes back to play again in 2021 with the Anti-Money Laundering Act 2020. AMLA, the Anti-Money Laundering Act. Now, if you want a bit of a deeper dive, this is in the sources, but of course we can see that this young act under Nixon, it starts small, it gets some challenges, and then lo and behold, it just gets these enormous shots in the arm where KYC comes in, where all of these rights begin to falter. Now, one of the fun things in this article from FTI Consulting, The Secret History of the Bank Secrecy Act, it is ironically brought into play via one of the actors in the Watergate scandal. Bernard Barker of the CIA had done a variety of check deposits into a Miami bank account. So about $25,000 checks, which totaled a little over $100,000. And what they end up finding was that one of the checks comes from Dahlberg, a Minnesota businessman, also a Midwest campaign finance chairman for none other than Richard Nixon. And lo and behold, we find that one of these $25,000 $5,000 checks comes from Richard Nixon's fundraising campaign. So it's got all the drama that you could look for in a story and all of these crazy fun things. Now, in reality, this did not take down Nixon, so he wasn't quite hoisted by his own petard. But ever since then, the BSA has just become this insurmountable force for surveillance. Anytime there is finance involved, anytime there is a digital transaction, and it has grown alongside the internet. So what was made originally for the banks now touches anybody that is a money transmitter business, an MSB. Of course, as the internet expanded and began to take on finances, right? The data kept growing. You can buy things on the internet. Major providers like Amazon, Google, they have some sort of MSB license in there. They are then required to follow the KYC AML rules under the Bank Secrecy Act. This means gathering data, storing that data, and giving it to the government upon request. Now, the big problem here is that as they continue to create these honeypots of data, we see exploit after exploit, and this is where things are problematic. So yes, one problem is that using this in DeFi protocols just doesn't make sense. They are not money transmitter businesses. They are not operating money service businesses. Just because they're taking cryptocurrencies and moving it around, there is no business inside a smart contract. It is purely computer logic that says X plus Y equals Z, and it does whatever it's programmed to execute on. So we are moving from this theoretical world where everything financial required an intermediary, a banker in the middle. Of course, all of the rules and regulations were set up on those intermediaries doing the checks, but we no longer have them. There is a great tweet that goes out to say, I am sorry that your entire banking surveillance is built on intermediaries that I do not require to operate. I am paraphrasing, but it is a frustrating act. And why do I talk about this? Because, well, KYC is moving from know your client to kill your client. KYC information for sale on the darknet. We deserve better in 2019. This is an old article, but since then, nothing has changed. Every time that these exploits happen, these KYC providers, they get no wrapping on the knuckles. They get no comeuppance. They have to pay no fines. But of course, they collect all of our data, our name, our socials, where we live, how much money we have. And when these exploits happen, they are extremely dangerous. Now, one thing I want to harken back to that kind of encapsulates why this is also silly. Not only does this idea of implementing digital ID checks and smart contracts to fight illicit finance inside of DeFi not make any sense on a technical reason, we have Zach XBT, our resident crypto sleuth. Zach solves the biggest unsolvables. He gets on the blockchain, he follows the money, and he is one of the great truth tellers of illicit money movement inside of crypto. Now, he goes on to say, threat actors will do exactly what they've always done for years and completely bypass the requirements by purchasing KYC'd accounts. You can buy verified accounts online from any platform for less than $100. Now, I can back this up. I have worked for a compliant entity that requires and follows the KYC AML rules. We record people when they actually make a purchase under these KYC laws so that we can see what's actually happening should nefarious money happen. Now, in these screen captures, you can see people trying to make investments, trying to make purchases, and just go tab through tab with different IDs, whether they be passports, driver's licenses, etc., and they just go tab for tab for tab, different identities. Now, the fact that they can be bought for so little, this has been something going on for years, and this directly breaks everything that KYC AML hopes to instill. And this does nothing for the prevention of illicit money movement. We have to realize that as you build these massive walls that only take one crack to get through, the criminals are more than capable of finding those cracks while the wall continues to grow around the citizen base, the populace. Now, meanwhile, innocent people inevitably get their information leaked. And of course, the complaint that compromised brokers and companies with breaches are held liable for their negligence, which they are not. For example, Krollwire had a breach for bankruptcy claimants. This was Genesis, BlockFi, FTX during the last collapse. And in August 2023, that led to $300+ million stolen via social engineering scams using the information obtained from Krollwire. So this company, whose whole job is the leading independent provider of risk and financial advisory solutions, was exploited of their entire base. Everybody who had these poor people who suffered the Genesis, BlockFi, FTX unwinding, right? These were lenders that went bust, and all these people lost their money. Not only did they lose their money, they had their entire identities exploited, which clearly led to over 300 million worth of scams. And it's absolutely nuts. Of course, this has been on sale from the dark web. It happens all the time. If you go to haveibeenpwned.com, you can find out if your emails have been breached. This happened recently with Google. So, like, holy goddamn hell. Now, I quickly banged into ChatGPT. Give me some major KYC exploits that have happened in the past. Unfortunately, we're seeing a lot coming from crypto in the beginning here. 2019, Binance, 2017, BitThumb. And these are startup companies that are trying to figure out how to comply with the Bank Secrecy Act. Up to 60,000 users, not terrible. 30,000 users, sure. 2021, Upstocks, 2.5 to 5.6 million users. We have 100 plus million users. We have 24 million users plus 793 businesses. We've got Optus, Australia, 10 million. I mean, these are not all in the US, but Snowflake, which is a millions across realms. And what are we looking at? Extensive ID data, social security numbers. And of course, this doesn't just extend to our names and our emails, but we're seeing it happen to our social security numbers time and time again. And what is the point of these things if they get exploited? And look, we're seeing it from Connect's Credit Union, where attackers stole names, account numbers, debit card, and social security. Is 172,000 people. Change Healthcare, United Healthcare from in 2024. Ransomware exfiltrated the personal health information for an estimated 190 million people, including social security numbers, amongst other personal medical data. AT&T, my God, 73 million customers, including social security numbers. Evolve Bank and Trust. Oh man, I mean, it just keeps going, and you can see, like, how much money laundering is being prevented at the cost of 190 million people having all of their data exposed. It is absolute buffoonery, and we really do have to ask ourselves, how much are we willing to bleed for the sake of preventing one cut? And at some point, it just doesn't make sense. And so recently, Coinbase, the poster child for compliance and regulated crypto in the United States. I mean, they just had 70,000 users' personal data leaked. And for anyone that followed this back when it happened earlier in the year, they actually kept this silent for months. What happened was that they outsourced their KYC provider to somebody in the Philippines. A worker there sold that data or opened the exploit for money. We don't really know what happened, but the attitude that, if you have to do compliance, you're going to outsource it to this third party that sits in the Philippines because, heck, you're looking to reduce costs. You're looking to maximize your business revenue. And this is just a gross treatment of your users' personal data. And of course, no recompense for this. There's nothing that they have to do or settle with or any sort of cash involvement. So the one thing that was so crazy about this, the Coinbase KYC data, it included how much money these users were storing on Coinbase, as well as their very addresses. Any attacker that wants to purchase this off the dark web could literally roll into their houses and demand at gunpoint, like we've seen in France, many fingers getting cut off, digits being lost, that they can say, hey, we know you have this crypto. We know you have it on Coinbase, so it's not some multi-sig crazy secure thing. Send that to me now, or I will kill your wife and children. And this is a very, very real threat. And what we have to ask ourselves, is this really a trade-off that makes sense as a general populace? Do we want everybody to be collecting our data like this? If we can put some sort of ZK proof in between, and this is largely what I've been talking about previously with ZK proofs. We could potentially store this data in a fragmented way across numerous servers where only a piece of it is being held. Like for me, my name is Graham, but you could store GRA in one location, HAM in another. You can keep parts of my social security number. You can keep parts of my accounting info. And when proven for a ZK proof, just to say, hey, is Graham an accredited investor? Yes or no? The proof itself can say yay or nay without revealing any of that data. This is where crypto becomes so important. But if we allow things like the Treasury to start putting this in on DeFi, well, it eliminates so much of that anti-fragility, so much of that strength, which is that the protocols will execute as desired. One of the beauties of this is, unlike the traditional financial system, a protocol doesn't care who you are, doesn't care the color of your skin, your gender, your queerness or not. It just does what it says it should do. The second we start putting these checks in, we can begin to influence these smart contracts however we like. Who's to say that companies don't throttle this and say, hey, we hate what's going on in Gaza. We don't want any Jews transacting through our protocol. There's nothing to stop this from happening, to expand, especially when we're talking about open source platforms, the broad diaspora. As this technology spreads across the globe, we want to build robust, verifiable smart contracts that not only scale to any country on the planet, but scale to any planet in the galaxy as we go outwards. We're talking about a highly scalable financial ecosystem, substantially larger at scale of what was ideated upon in the 1970s. So, of course, we now have KYC, known as Know Your Client, very much pivoting into KYC as Kill Your Client. Is this good for you? I don't think so. It's something I want to bring to your attention, and definitely something worth paying attention to, because unlike China, which just says, hey, we're going to have a social score, we're going to look into what you're doing, the US does it in a much more sinister way, a little more quiet. We do it through the Patriot Act. Remember, the TSA was initially set up as a part-time agency. It was supposed to phase away. Now look at everything that's been set up, all of the facial scanning that they're putting in. We're allowing private businesses like Clear to allow the wealthy to leapfrog these arduous high friction lines. Is this the way we want society to run? That's not really what this podcast is about, but I do not like the KYC. It always gets exploited. And just like everything else, hackers only need to find one small way to get in there. So that's your KYC AML lesson, the Bank Secrecy Act, which is something that just keeps growing, keeps getting more powerful, and is controlled by those bureaucrats. Let's be careful. Let's find new paths. Let's build tech that can hold that data and provide that security in a rational way, in a sane way. And at the end of the day, if people are moving money illicitly, we should be looking at the on-ramps, off-ramps. Who cares what you do with illicit digital currencies as long as the blockchain can track them? Remember, we don't have a whole world set up where people are actually transacting in these cryptos. This might be something that we have to deal with then, but for now, they need to convert it to real dollars or something. And at that point, KYC is always present. So remember, Bitcoin being criminal futures, if you steal it, if you use it for whatever reason you're not supposed to, the second you try to pull that out and buy something with it, they get you. So maybe we don't need it. Maybe by tracking everything on chain, we've already solved that problem where we can track people. And yes, they don't have identities, but at some point they do make a slip and that identity reveals itself. There are better formats to use than just overarching regulation and bureaucratic mechanisms. That Bank Secrecy Act, it has been something that grows and grows and grows and consumes and consumes and consumes. And what do we have now? But we have exploited databases that have, at the very least, all of our email addresses and our phone numbers. And where do you think those spam emails and spam callers are coming from? KYC exploits. So maybe we prevent a couple $1,000s of money laundering here, $1 million there. But what are we exchanging? Our freedom? Sure. But also our sanguine, getting blown up every 2 seconds for a scam mail. Maybe grandma accidentally falls victim to that phishing campaign, so you could lose very real dollars in the hopes that, North Korea doesn't launder a buck or two here or there. I think we're focusing on all the incorrect places, but who am I to say? I'm just a commenter. With that being said, stay safe out there. The market's being wonky, and heck, we apparently have the largest amount of short positions on Ethereum that the market has ever seen. So even after this pump, everyone's trying to capitalize on a dump. It's a wild world out there. Stay safe, and I'll see you tomorrow.